Plotinus is believed to have lived from 204 AD to 270 AD. He is widely known as the father of Neoplatonism. Many modern scholars see his works as a break from Plato, a complete reinvention of Plato's rational approach. Plotinus himself seemed to see his teachings as an extension of the metaphysics that Plato already had spelled out, or at least hinted at in his dialogues. Plotinus elucidated the implications of what this metaphysics says about the nature of reality and what it means for us as spiritual beings living in a divine cosmos. Part of the beauty of Plotinus's works is that he brings metaphysics to life. The only writings Plotinus has left us were all written towards the end of his life, and they were created at the urging of his students. He wrote 54 essays in total. They are grouped into 6 bundles of 9 essays each, and so they are called the Enneads. Ennead means a group of 9 in Greek. The essay that I am going to focus on in this video is the 7th essay in the 3rd bundle, or Ennead. This one is on eternity and time, and I will be pulling quotes out from the A.H. Armstrong translation. We can roughly divide the essay into 2 parts. The first part focuses on eternity, and the second on the realm of time. The essay is divided into 13 sections. The first 6 present to us the realm of eternity. And here is how Plotinus introduces the topic. Eternity and time, we say, are 2 different things, the one belonging to the sphere of the nature which lasts forever, the other to that of becoming and of this universe. And at once, and as if by a fairly continuous application of our concept of them, we think that we have a clear and distinct experience of them in our own souls, as we are always speaking of them and using their names on every occasion. Plotinus now gives us his methodology for this essay. First, we should inquire about eternity. What sort of thing those who make it different from time consider it to be? For when we know that which holds the position of archetype, it will perhaps become clear how it is with its image, which the philosophers say time is. I will now jump to section 3, where Plotinus discusses eternity in terms of the 5 genera of being. And when one looks closely into this manifold power, then, according as one sees it as a subject, a kind of substrate, one calls it substance. Then one calls it motion, according as one sees it as life. And then rest, insofar as it is always in every way unchangingly itself. The other and the same, and that these realities are altogether one. From here, he is going to tie eternity to intelligible life. Let's see how he does this. So too, one puts it all together again into one, so as to be only life, compressing the otherness in these intelligible realities, and seeing the unceasingness and self-identity of their activity, and that it is never other, and is not a thinking or a life that goes from one thing to another, but is always the self-same without extension or interval. Seeing all this, one sees eternity in seeing a life that abides in the same, and always has the all present to it. Not now this and then again that, but all things at once, and not now some things and then again others, but a partless completion, as if they were all together in a point and had not yet begun to go out and flow into lines. It is something which abides in the same in itself, and does not change at all, but is always in the present, because nothing of it has passed away. Nor again is there anything to come into being, but that which it is. So that eternity is not the substrate, but something which, as it were, shines out from the substrate itself in respect of what is called its sameness. In speaking about the fact that it is not going to be, but is already, that it is as it is and not otherwise, for what could come to be for it afterwards, which it is not already. Nor again will it be afterwards what it is not already. For there is nothing starting from which it will arrive at the present moment, for that could be nothing else but what is now. Nor is it going to be what it does not now contain in itself. Necessarily there will be no was about it, for what is there that was for it and has passed away? Nor any will be, for what will be for it? So there remains for it only to be in its being just what it is. That then, which was not and will not be, but is only, which has being which is static by not changing to the will be, nor ever having changed. This is eternity. The life then, which belongs to that which exists and is in being, altogether and full, completely without extension or interval, is that which we are looking for, eternity. So now Plotinus has defined eternity. And from here he is going to talk about its nature. This takes us into section 4 of the essay. Now this true whole, if it really is a whole, must not only be whole in the sense that it is all things, but it must have its wholeness in such a way that it is deficient in nothing. If this is so, there is nothing that is going to be for it. For if something is going to be, it was lacking to it before, so it was not whole. But what could happen to it contrary to its nature? For it is not affected in any way. So then, the complete and whole substance of reality, not that in the parts only, but that which consists in the impossibility of any future diminution, and the fact that nothing non-existent could be added to it. For the all in whole must not only have all real beings present to it, but must not have anything that is at any time non-existent. This state in nature of complete reality would be eternity. In section 5, Plotinus describes the methodology of one's efforts towards knowing thyself. And I want to point out that for Plotinus, this is an actual exercise for you to do. It's not merely a theory to read about. He writes, "What then, if one does not depart at all from one's contemplation of it, but stays in its company, wondering at its nature, and able to do so by a natural power which never fails? Surely one would be, would one not, oneself, on the move towards eternity, and never falling away from it at all, that one might be like it and eternal, contemplating eternity and the eternal by the eternal in oneself." So this is our contemplation. And if someone were in this way to speak of eternity as a life which is here and now, endless because it is total and expends nothing of itself, since it has no past or future, for if it had, it would not now be a total life. He would be near to defining it. And now section 6. Now since the nature which is of this kind, altogether beautiful and everlasting in this way, is around the one and comes from it, and is directed towards it, in no way going out from it, but always abiding around it and in it, and living according to it. And since this was stated by Plato, as I think finely, and with deep meaning, and not to no purpose, in these words of his, as eternity remains in one, which is a quote from Timaeus at 37d. And the intention of these words, which is not merely that eternity brings itself into unity with relation to itself, but rather that it is the life always the same of real being around the one. This then is what we are seeking, and abiding like this is being eternity. But that which has no need of time to come, which is not measured by another time or by an unlimited time which will be without end, but it possesses what it ought to be. This is what our thought stretches out to, that whose being does not come from a certain extent of time, but exists before the extent of time. In other words, eternity is metaphysically prior to time. It is not the whole of time. It is rather outside of time, before time. And this brings us to the second part of the essay, on time. And this will take us to the end of the essay. It covers sections 7 through 13. What it means to be in time and what it means to be in eternity may become known to us when we have discovered time. From here, he goes into a number of potential definitions of time, and he is then going to summarily dismiss them all. I'm going to jump to Plotinus's own definition of time. This is section 11. We must take ourselves back to the disposition which we said existed in eternity, to that quiet life, all a single whole, still unbounded, altogether without declination, resting in and directed toward eternity. Time did not yet exist, not at any rate for the beings of that world. We shall produce time by means of the form and nature of what comes after. One might perhaps ask time, when it has come into being, to tell us how it did come into being and appear. It might say something like this about itself, that before, when it had not yet in fact produced this before, or felt the need of the after, it was at rest with eternity in real being. It was not yet time, but itself too kept quiet in that. So the mean between eternity and time that is in motion is an unmoving, perpetual whole. But since there was a restlessly active nature which wanted to control itself and be on its own, and chose to seek for more than its present state, this moved, and time moved with it. And so, always moving on to the next and the after, and what is not the same, but one thing after another, we made a long stretch of our journey and constructed time as an image of eternity. As from a quiet seed, the formative principle, unfolding itself, advances, as it thinks, to largeness, but does away with the largeness by division, and instead of keeping its unity in itself, it squanders it outside itself, and so goes forward to a weaker extension. In the same way, soul, making the world of sense in imitation of that other world, moving with a motion which is not that which exists there, but like it, and intending to be an image of it, first of all puts itself into time, which it made instead of eternity, and then handed over that which came into being as a slave to time, by making the whole of it exist in time, and encompassing all its ways with time. For since the world of sense moves in soul, there is no other place of this universe than soul, it moves also in the time of soul. So would it be sense to say that time is the life of soul in a movement of passage from one way of life to another? And Plotinus's answer is yes. For if eternity is life at rest, unchanging and identical and already unbounded, and time must exist as an image of eternity in the same relation as that in which this all stands to the intelligible all, then we must say that there is, instead of the life there, another life having, in a way of speaking, the same name as this power of the soul, and instead of intelligible motion, we must say that there is the motion of the part of soul. And instead of sameness and self-identity and abiding, that which does not abide in the same, but does one act after another, and instead of that which is one without distance or separation, an image of unity or the one, time is that which is one in continuity. And instead of a complete unbounded whole, time is a continuous unbounded succession. And instead of a whole altogether, a whole which is and always will be, time is going to come into being part by part. For this is the way in which it will imitate that which is already a whole, already altogether and unbounded, by intending to be always making an increase in its being. For this is how its being will imitate the being of the intelligible world. But one must not conceive time as outside soul, any more than eternity there is outside real being. It is not an accompaniment of soul, nor something that comes after, any more than eternity there, but something which is seen along with it, and exists in it and with it, as eternity does there with real being. And now we are in section 12. We must understand too from this that this nature is time, the extent of life of this kind which goes forward in even and uniform changes, progressing quietly, and which possesses continuity of activity. Now Plotinus muses what would happen if we could stop time. Now if in our thought we were to make this power turn back again and put a stop to this life which it now has without stop and never ending, and that this part of the soul turned back to the intelligible world and to eternity and rested quietly there, what would there still be except eternity? For the heavenly sphere itself would not be there, since its existence is not primary, for it exists and moves in time. And if it comes to a stop, we shall measure the duration of its stop by the activity of soul, as long as soul is outside eternity. If then, when soul leaves this activity and returns to unity, time is abolished, it is clear that the beginning of this movement in this direction and this form of the life of soul generates time. This is why it is said that time came into existence simultaneously with this universe, because soul generated it along with this universe. We are now in the final section of the essay, section 13. Why then do we trace back the origin of this movement of the all to that which encompasses it, and say that it is in time, but we do not say that the movement of soul, which goes on in it in everlasting progression, is in time? It is because what is before the movement of soul is eternity, which does not run along with it or stretch out with it. This movement of soul was the first to enter time, and it generated time, and possesses it along with its own activity. How then is time everywhere? Because soul too is not absent from any part of the universe. just as the soul in us is not absent from any part of us. The movement of soul, then, is that which exists primarily and in which the others are. But it is not any more in anything, for it will have nothing to be in. And the same is true also of the soul of the all. Is time then also in us? It is in every soul of this kind, and in the same form in every one of them, and all are one. So time will not be split up any more than eternity, which in a different way is in all the eternal beings of the same form. And this brings us to the end of the essay. Let me know in the comments what you think of Plotinus and what you think of his presentation of eternity and of time.